Hi everyone, happy Monday. Welcome back to the Endo Smile podcast. Today we're going to continue our reading of The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck, and we are on chapter 3. I hope you guys all enjoy. Chapter 3, Meeting the Teacher. As Dante flees the slopes of Mount Delectable, he sees a human figure walking in the dark wood. He calls out, desperate for help, but unnerved by the suspicion that this person may not be, what's the word? Oh yes, alive. Sure enough, it turns out to be a ghost, but the best possible ghost. Publius Virgilius Maro, better known as Virgil. Yes, the guy's been dead for centuries, but on the plus side, he's Dante's favorite poet. After introducing himself, Virgil asks why Dante isn't clambering up Mount Delectable with all the other kids. When Dante points out the bloodthirsty leopard that's been chasing him, Virgil seems to grasp the entire situation. He says that Dante will have to take an altogether different road to get out of the dark wood of error. Then he appoints himself as a travel companion and guide, saying he's been sent to help Dante through the journey. How the teacher arrives. That's fantasy for you, am I right? In his worst hour, out in the middle of nowhere, Dante just happens to come across his favorite undead writer, who just happens to know exactly where Dante needs to go and just happens to have the free time and the inclination to serve as a personal escort. If only the real world worked that way, right? Well, here's the thing, it does. I've watched this kind of small miracle play out over and over in my own life and the lives of clients. Just when a teacher became necessary for forward progress, someone or something showed up to help. In actual fact, Dante Alighieri first met Virgil by reading his poetry. Reading is the way I've met most of my life teachers and clients often tell me that just when they felt most confused, the perfect book seemed to throw itself off the shelf and into their attention. Sometimes we meet our teachers because someone sees we need help and drags us to therapy, rehab, yoga, or some other environment where we can meet wise guides. Or maybe we catch a snippet of a podcast or an online lecture and become fascinated by the speaker. Joseph Campbell, the famous professor of comparative mythology, noticed that in legends from around the world, some kind of mentor arrives shortly after a hero has accepted a call to adventure. Embarking on the way of integrity is just such a situation. We tend to meet teachers after we've realized we're wandering in a dark wood of error, after we've tried and failed to get out of it by climbing Mount Delectable, and while we're still being dodged by the wild beasts of our painful emotions. At this point, our odds of finding the way back to wholeness all by ourselves are vanishingly small. After all, we wandered off course because of ideas and behaviors we've been learning since birth. Most of these errors lurk in our physiological blind spots. Without some outside assistant, we might never see them, no matter how earnestly we try. But someone with a different perspective can spot what we're missing and help us set it right. And so we are primed to meet a very specific type of teacher, a psychopomp, or guide of the soul. Before going any further, I need to point out something absolutely crucial. No external teacher can ever be the answer to all your problems. The role of soul teachers is crucial but limited. They offer just enough feedback to help us find the wisdom at the core of our own consciousness. Ultimately, spoiler alert, Virgil won't be able to guide Dante all the way to the paradise. No one can give us pure integrity. Knowing our truth is something we can and must learn to do on our own. The role of the soul guide is simply to put us in touch with our innate ability to sense the truth. That said, when we're still wandering around the dark wood of error, knowing we're lost but clueless about how to find ourselves, a teacher is essential. So stay alert for anyone that may offer help or guidance. The teacher may not look like what you expect. How to recognize a soul teacher. Soul teachers don't always fit our preconceptions. Some soul guides are actual school teachers, like the Robin Williams character in Dead Poet Society, whose wacky methods open his pupils' hearts and souls along with their minds. But, as I've mentioned, your teacher may arrive via a book, a song, an animal. It may even show up as a time of intense experience, a phase when circumstances force you to gain a great deal of understanding fast. You may have had one or more of these oddly educational phases in your life. We've all seen them dramatized in movies. A bigot's life is saved by the very person he despises. A money-obsessed socialite loses her savings to a Ponzi scheme the same week her mansion burns to the ground. A narcissistic doctor develops the very illness he's been treating and is forced to experience his patient's point of view. When this kind of thing happens to us, we may feel as if we're being tutored by a subtle but powerful energy far beyond our control. Any force that helps produce such situations is clearly a master soul teacher. Most of our teachers, however, show up as individual humans, usually rather odd ones. Meeting yours probably won't feel like sitting down with a loving nanny or a wise, bespectacled professor. When we first encounter true soul teachers, they often appear anomalous, annoying, incomprehensive, or downright weird. I'm going to give you some general rules for identifying them. But first, let me tell you what a soul teacher is not, so you won't become enchanted with a fraudulent psychopomp. There are plenty of people who are very excited to tell you exactly what you should do, think, and be. TV pundits, authority figures, opinionated relatives, friends who've just found religion, or strangers shouting at you from the internet. When you meet such a person, be very careful. Anyone who tries to force feed you advice isn't likely to be a competent soul guide. Other people promise to take you to the top of Mount Delectable, making you beautiful, rich, and famous in exchange for absolute devotion and or large sums of money. Again, these are rarely real soul teachers. If your heart yearns to follow such a person, go ahead, but beware of the craving that can arise when you're subjected to advertising. A real soul teacher will draw your attention in a way that makes you feel inwardly driven, not dazed by powerful marketing. If you need a review, you can repeat the exercise in Chapter 2. These days, this term soul teacher is used by some spiritually minded folks to describe people they can't stand. She's my most profound teacher, they'll say of the coworker with the hideous braying laugh, or of the stepchild who steals their credit cards to pay for sex. He's the Buddha in my path. The danger of this is that it may lead people to stay in relationship dynamics that are actually unhealthy. Genuine soul teachers may perplex or disturb us, but they tend to be fascinating, not repulsive or unbearable. With all that out of the way, here's what I do mean when I say soul teacher. Soul teachers capture our attention. When we meet a true guide, there's often something almost eerie about the encounter. Part of our attention gets inexplicably fixated on whoever or whatever has shown up to teach us. I call this the R2-D2 effect, after the little droid in the first Star Wars movie. When the perspective of his friend C-3PO, everything is normal until the moment R2-D2 meets with Princess Leia, when he zips off, abandoning his companion. Unbeknownst to C-3PO, the little droid has been given a mission by Princess Leia. That purpose overrides all other directives. Sometimes our minds seem to buzz off in this unexpected way. We may find ourselves ruminating about a person we barely met at a dinner party, or an old friend we haven't seen for years, or a stranger whose name comes up in conversations with 3 different people. We don't know why these individuals command so much of our attention, but we can't stop thinking about them. We may even have the disconcerting sense that they've moved into our minds. We may find ourselves arguing with them or explaining ourselves to them, all the time wondering why we care so much what they think. Soul teachers come with a dash of magic. In Joseph Campbell's heroic saga, the hero's meeting with the teacher occurs by fate, magic, and divine assignment. When we meet a soul guide, there's often a series of coincidences or a touch of grace bringing teacher and student together. This bit of magic validates the R2-D2 effect, hinting that it's our destiny to cross paths with a particular teacher. For instance, my client Michelle once received a certain self-help book as a gift from a friend, found another copy lying on an empty park bench, and ran into the author at a book signing, all in the same week. That book, she told me, was exactly what she needed. Another client, Erin, met a fellow American at a coffee shop during a vacation in Paris. Later, she told me, I didn't go to France to meet other Americans, but for some reason, I couldn't stop chatting with him. Erin's new acquaintance turned out to be a trauma counselor who lived a 10-minute drive from her home in Cleveland. Erin had survived a rape attempt in college. Once home from her vacation, she had a few sessions with her new friend that eased the suffering based on that trauma. Still, another client, Michael, was waiting tables at a restaurant when, for some reason, he felt compelled to trade one of his tables with another waiter. The next party to sit at his new table included an old friend of Michael's father. They struck up a conversation that eventually led to the older man offering Michael a job, then mentoring him until he learned enough to succeed on his own. These stories may lull you into thinking that you don't need to look for a teacher, that the perfect soul guide will break into your apartment and offer salvation while you sit in your underwear eating Fruit Loops out of the box. This could happen. I've seen weirder things, but it probably won't. As they say, the teacher appears when the student is ready. We make ourselves ready just by realizing we're lost and committing to the way of integrity. A teacher will eventually show up, often in unexpected ways. The dash of magic, if and when it happens, is like the cherry on the sundae. Soul teachers offer genuine love. When we hear the term soul teacher, most of us initially picture a soothing, comforting presence, someone to sing us to sleep and then watch over us. But a real soul guide's job is to wake us up when we're somnambulating through the dark wood of error. This may involve jangling us, shocking us, contradicting what we deeply believe. In Asian traditions, spiritual teachers are known for dashing cold water in their students' faces or whacking them with bamboo sticks. It may be years before we realize, often in hindsight, that this behavior is deeply loving. Many of us use the word love to describe the kind of devotion spiders feel for flies. Spiders genuinely love flies, the way they taste, the way they crunch. They express that love by wrapping up any fly they can catch and keeping it close, slurping out its life force bit by bit. I've had many clients whose parents, friends, or lovers treated them this way. I call it spider love, though of course it's really not love at all. It's a predator-prey relationship, and soul teachers never do it. Real love doesn't want anyone to be immobilized or attached, certainly not in the dark wood of error. It wants, always, 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 to set us free. That's why our truest guides don't help us get comfortable in our illusions. Instead, they rattle our cages, make us uneasy, compensate our sedatives. When someone you feel drawn to upsets your pattern of thought, you may feel petulant and unloved, like a child whose parents refuse to serve candy for dinner. But pay close attention. As long as it liberates you, what looks like harshness or even cruelty may, in fact, be the purest love you could possibly receive. Soul teachers don't share our culture's values. What? Not share our values? Aren't we supposed to spend our lives looking for teachers who do share our values? Remember, cultural value systems play a central role in leading us off our true path and sending us up all those versions of Mount Delectable. Following cultural values, we exhaust ourselves, chasing things that will never make us genuinely happy. To lead us away from such errors, soul teachers must be free from our particular brand of cultural delusion. Because of this, real soul guides are the definition of countercultural. Some of them are merely unpredictable, while others might live outside culture altogether, self-determined and wild, like John the Baptist before he ran into Jesus, or Jesus himself with his obstinate refusal to throw rocks at sinners. Soul teachers often say and do things that just aren't said and done in our social circles or any social circle. Their manners, their reactions, or advice may be different from anything we're used to. Contrarian soul teachers are honored in many traditions. The Lakota people have sacred clowns who deliberately defy social convention by riding their horses backwards, going half naked in winter, saying rude things at the worst possible moment. In medieval Europe, the court jesters were allowed to insult anyone, even the king. Teachers who flout convention and poke fun help us keep from getting lost in our social roles and taking ourselves too seriously. Of course, not everyone who's strange, rude, or antisocial is a true soul guide. Such teachers are countercultural in a very particular way. They jolt us out of assumptions and force us to see new perspective. By contrast, mere gibberish may seem bizarre, but it won't feel compellingly interesting and it won't expand your mind. I felt the difference between cultural confusion and soul guidance after my adolescent crisis and my year of reading philosophy. Still curious about wisdom traditions, I read a lot of books I've heard touted as soul guides. I'd been told that reading Mormon scripture was perhaps the most important way to ensure a happy life. I followed the rules, but never found myself deeply liberated by those particular books. Then I began studying Chinese and started reading things that made no sense to my American-made mind. Here's an example. For my favorite book, the Tao Te Ching, written about 2500 BC, all streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. This is a very un-Western way of thinking. At first blush, it may sound a little alien to you, a little strange. But see if it makes sense. Makes you want to stop and think. See if it knocks at the door at your mind, asking to come in. This is how real soul guidance affects us. It may be strange, but it isn't bizarre. It's potent, like concentrated cleanser. It challenges our assumptions, but the challenge feels oddly compelling. I'm going to read it again. All streams flow to the sea because it is lower than they are. Humility gives it its power. Soul teachers don't care about our hustle. Because they're our outside culture, real soul guides couldn't give a damn about our hustles. They don't gush over us when we act sweet or goggle at our street smart toughness or coo over our victim stories or bow before our wealth and status. If you give a soul teacher a lavish gift, she may thank you and then immediately hand over your precious item to a passing stranger. That actually happened to me once. No flattery, manipulation, or temper tantrum will move soul teachers 1 millimeter from their own true paths. This may be as frustrating to our egos as it is necessary for our liberation. I had a client I'll call Olivia, a classical pianist whose music teacher drove her to distraction, dismissing all her impressive skills and giving her advice she couldn't follow. He never seemed to approve of anything I do, she told me. He never compliments me, just listens to my performance and says things like, now play it as if you have no past. What the heck does that even mean? Should I just sit on the piano bench without moving and pretend I'm not really there? Despite her frustration, Olivia felt maddeningly intrigued by her teacher and continued to work with him. One day he gave her so many complicated rapid-fire instructions that as she began playing, she lost track of them all. It wasn't that my mind went blank, Olivia told me. It actually seemed to go away. At that moment, she stopped feeling herself as being separate from the music. I stopped trying to impress him, she said. I became those sounds as they made themselves happen with my fingers. It was so beautiful that there were tears in my eyes, and when I looked at my teacher, there were tears in his too. There was nothing to say about it. It was just perfect. Soul teachers help us think the unthinkable. Not only do soul teachers fail to fall in with their hustles, they may actually talk about the fact that we're hustling. Instead of praising our designer clothes or clever wordplay, they may mention that we seem to be trying to impress them. When we cover our existential despair with flippancy, they may skip the polite laughter and ask why we're acting happy when we seem so sad. Yes, I know, shocking. This violates what psychiatrist Alice Miller calls the cardinal rule of all cultures. Don't ever mention the rules. In other words, never articulate that there's an unspoken code everyone in the room has been trained to follow. Even though you know everyone can see that the emperor has no clothes, don't mention that everyone's pretending he's dressed because everyone's afraid. Never say, Mother takes too much laudanum. But more importantly, never articulate the family's unspoken rule against mentioning Mother's laudanum habit. Just lie when you're expected to lie, never mentioning that you all know you're lying. Soul teachers just run right over this rule and talk openly and honestly about what's actually going on, like savages. Soul teachers know when to quit. When you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. That saying attributed to the Zen master Linji doesn't mean you should actually go after monks with chainsaws. It means that once you've recognized a real soul guide, you may be tempted to latch on to that person's teaching like a baby sloth. The problem is that reality is too vast and intricate to be fully represented by one person, one set of ideas, or indeed all people and ideas combined. The idea of killing the Buddha means learning all you can from any given teacher until you begin to transcend them. Then you can use both the truths you've learned and the falsehoods you've spotted to move on. Every true guide will tell you this repeatedly and insistently turning you back to your own discernment as the final arbiter of your beliefs. One of my favorite Indian sages, Gadata Maharaj put it this way: the outer teacher is merely a milestone. It is only your inner teacher that will walk with you to the goal, for he or she is the goal. Finding your inner guidance. Now that I've given you a few pointers for recognizing an outward soul teacher, I want you to talk about the inner teacher, the one who is your goal. The ultimate guide has been with you since before you were born, and will be available to you until the moment you draw your last breath, and who knows, maybe even after. Remember when Dante wrote the Divine Comedy, he created the ghost of Virgil in his imagination. Dante's real guide was a projected teacher he made up, a part of himself. No external guide you'll meet will ever be as accurate as a teacher in your soul, and none can ever be as constant. Your inner teacher has many names, but none of them really conveys the essence of the core wisdom. When spiritual traditions set out to describe it, they generated a lot of semantic confusion. This is because they're trying to describe something indescribable. Spiritual traditions have coined a whole lexicon of terms trying to label the inner teacher, the wisdom at our center, the essence of what we actually intrinsically are. In this book, I've referred to our inner teacher primarily as your integrity, but I've also used the terms true self, true nature, and essential self. In another book, I call it the meta self, which means beyond self, as opposed to your meat self, your body and brain. Labels from other writers include the no self, obsolete awareness, Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, enlightened mind, God consciousness, the non-being, the I am the absolute, the universe, fundamental consciousness, and many more. The real essence of your inner teacher lies beyond labels. You can't experience it by thinking about it, only by being it. Now, of course, having just told you that your inner teacher is indescribable, I'm going to try to describe it. When we think, hear, or understand something that's deeply true to us, our inner teachers rise in us as a delicious, lucid resonance. When we grasp truth, any truth, from the correct solution to a math problem to a capacity for love, all of our ways of knowing align. We recognize this alignment as our ideal state of being. It feels calm, clear, still, and open. That feeling is the inner teacher saying yes. The way of integrity is simply to listen to this voice, to sustain this feeling, not just occasionally, but often, even continuously. Individuals who can do this are venerated as spiritual masters. If you despair of ever becoming so enlightened, remember that you've already done it once. You were a baby for a while, and babies who are too young to have any belief simply align with what they truly perceive. That's why spiritual teachers often point to little children as role models for enlightening living. But even we grown-ups, lost in the dark wood of error, feel at one with our true selves again every time we brush away a cobweb of false belief and perceive something real. At these moments, when the inner teacher makes its presence known, we sometimes say we're experiencing the ring of truth. The last time you woke up from a dream, it may have taken you a second to orient yourself, but you soon figured out that what had seemed to be reality only moments before was just a hallucination. How did you make this determination? How did you decide which experience was real and which was illusionary? By checking in with the inner teacher I've described. This isn't a complicated process. Waking life is observably more resonant with truth than a dream once we've evaluated the two experiences. We do this with all our meaning-making systems, body, mind, heart, and soul. I'm going to spend some time breaking this down for you, using that 4-part division, body, mind, heart, soul. I'm dwelling on this because listening to our inner teacher is the most important skill we need to follow the way of integrity. When we meet external soul teachers, we know to trust them only because we feel the ring of truth internally. And even when no external teacher is available, the inner teacher always is. So, another characteristic of the inner teacher, the most important one, is that you can feel it in all aspects of you, being body, mind, heart, soul at once. The body's reaction to recognizing truth is relaxation, a literal involuntary release of muscle tension. When we surrender to the truth, even difficult truth, our body may almost go limp, and we begin breathing more deeply. This may have happened to you when you read the statements at the end of chapter 1, such as, I don't know what to do, or I need help. When our minds recognize truth, we experience that an invisible cartoon light bulb going on in our heads, the feeling of a riddle being solved. Aha, we think, or I get it, or of course, all the puzzle pieces fit. The math works. Everything makes logical sense. To our heart, the ring of truth feels like a flower opening up. In total integrity, we're completely available to all emotion, overwhelming love, deep grief, terrible anger, sharp fear. This emotion may be painful, but it doesn't cause the intense, dull suffering we feel in the dark wood of error. The emotional pain of a hard truth is eased by our soul's response to aligning with reality. Around and beyond mere emotion, we feel a sense of freedom, a vast openness that includes all aspects of our experience. We connect with an unalterable stillness around and within us. There's space for pain, there's space for joy, and the space in which all sensation happens is made up of absolute well-being. We are a perfect, fertile no-thingness in which everything, even pain, has a useful place. All this mystical language may sound strange, but in fact, your inner teacher is the part of you that feels most stable and ordinary. Because our secular culture denies the spiritual, some people think the ring of truth must feel unusual, like interior fireworks. In fact, it's the opposite. Our sense of truth, our ultimate inner teacher, is as familiar to us as the sun and the moon. We use it constantly in ordinary perception. As I've just noted, it's what allows us to distinguish our dreams from waking life every single morning. Practices like fasting, taking psychedelic drugs, or spending years in silence can help us access the spiritual dimension of our being. But we're also responding to spiritual experiences every time we recognize any truth, even the most ordinary. Spiritual confirmation is present when we remember a phone number, laugh at a joke, or forgive ourselves for a mistake. It waves us cheerfully from the most mundane things, like little Yoda scuttling after Luke Skywalker, as Luke searches for the Jedi Master he assumes must be huge and imposing. Every external teacher you'll ever meet, will be there only to help you connect with a sense of truth, this body, mind, heart, soul chime that is your ultimate inner teacher. For example, I hope this book is a helpful guide on your journey to integrity. But if you don't feel the ring of truth as you read something written here, disregard my words. Don't listen to me. Listen to yourself. Do the same when the person teaching you is your minister, your karate teacher, your mayor, or your spouse. Every real soul guide outside you will bow to the teacher inside you. My most unexpected soul teacher. As I've mentioned, when I was a teenager, the soul teacher who met me in the dark wood of error was Immanuel Kant via his opus, The Critique of Pure Reason. Reading Kant's prose was like eating machine parts, but as he explained why pure reason can't know anything absolutely, I felt my whole being, body, mind, heart, and soul come into alignment. I went limp with relief, with the logic of Kant's arguments, with the freedom they offered me. I rested in Kant's worldview as I finished college, got married, went back to Harvard for my master's and doctoral degrees. I had my first child, a daughter, between undergraduate and graduate school. Then I got pregnant again. I didn't know it, but I was headed into one of those situations in which the whole world takes on a soul teacher's role. My world was about to turn upside down. First of all, from the moment my son Adam was conceived, I became, I'll just say it, psychic. I could see what was happening to loved ones far away. I knew things would occur before they did. I felt myself being physically saved by people who weren't there. I was pulled from a burning building by someone no one saw, touched by invisible hands that stopped what should have been a fatal bleed out. Then, almost 6 months into my pregnancy, I learned that Adam had Down syndrome. Classic soul teacher move. This extremely disturbing, culturally unacceptable, wild, unborn being shocked me clean out of my comfortable worldview. I had to either release my judgments about the value of intellect and fling my mind open to the possibility of some deeper reality, or hack myself apart from my own lived experience, totally destroying my integrity. It was time to kill the Buddha. I gave up Kant's pure reason, headed back down the slopes of the intellectual Mount Delectable, and accepted as my next soul teacher an unborn baby who would never in his life read philosophy. All my doctors told me it was stupid and cruel to continue that pregnancy. I didn't agree with their pro-choice politics. I didn't disagree with their pro-choice politics. Those still made a lot more sense to me than the Mormon belief that I'd be cast into outer darkness. if I had an abortion. But you know what? The Harvard doctors and the Mormon authorities all sounded weirdly alike. They were so certain, so absolute in their culture-based values. Nothing they said resonated with my inner teacher, my sense of truth. Instead, it made me tense, confused, numb, and unable to access any kind of inner stillness. Of course, all the arguments I heard made sense from within each speaker's cultural value system, but the things that were happening to me, my physical misery, my weird psychic experiences, my baby's extra chromosome, my maternal love for him, didn't come from culture. They came from nature. And nature seemed determined to take me beyond all the beliefs and behaviors approved of by my society. I suffered intensely during the next few months, but every now and then when I was too tired to struggle, my body, mind, heart, and soul would fall into their natural alignment, integrity. It was like entering the eye of a hurricane, right in the center of all that howling pain, bruised by the whirling debris of my shattered plans for life. I'd felt a moment of utter, silent, exquisite peace. Everything is okay, I would say without words. You're going to be fine. I had nothing in my vocabulary to describe this teacher. It definitely wasn't the bearded male god of my childhood, nor the trusty metal scalpel of pure reason. But in the rare moments I experienced it, the ring of truth chimed so intensely inside me, I felt all my preconceptions dissolving. All right, here's the exercise. Meeting your inner teacher. Maybe you've never had an experience of pure, sweet integrity. Do you want to have it? Or maybe you're remembering an experience of feeling briefly but totally aligned with your own truth. Do you want that feeling back? If so, one powerful step you can take right now is to acknowledge not only that you're feeling feeling a bit lost, but that you would really like to have a soul teacher. Our society doesn't encourage you to admit this, but if it's true for you, your heart won't stop yearning for the mentor to arrive. Allow this feeling to keep your eyes open. Your soul guide may show up any minute from virtually anywhere, and if you'd like something to do while you're waiting for that to reason, here's a way that you can access your inner teacher right now. For this exercise, you'll need 5 to 10 minutes in a quiet place where you won't be interrupted. You'll also need something to write with. You can use your own paper for this exercise or fill the spaces in below. So, number 1, here's the prompt. In the previous chapter, you wrote down a few things you consistently make yourself do, even though you don't really want to do them. Now pick one of these things, or think of a brand new one, and write it here. With this activity in mind, say to yourself, I am meant to do this. For example, if your activity is take out the garbage, mentally repeat over and over, I am meant to take the garbage. As you repeat, I am meant to take out the garbage, notice any physical sensation. Scan your body, noting the feeling in your muscles, joints, stomach, gut, skin surface, and so on. Write down anything you notice. Now turn your attention to your emotions. As you repeat, I am meant to so-and-so, what emotional reactions arise? Anxiety, bliss, apathy? Write them down. Answer the question yes or no. As you mentally repeat, I am meant to fill in the blank, do you feel free? Circle 1, yes or no. Now let go of the thought, I am meant to do this. Instead, mentally repeat the sentence, I am meant to live in peace. You don't have to believe this, just repeat it in your mind over and over again. I am meant to live in peace. As you repeat, I am meant to live in peace, again, notice your physical sensations. Scan your whole body with your attention and write down what you're feeling physically. Still repeating, I am meant to live in peace. Notice any emotions arising. Write them down. Finally, answer this question, yes or no. As you mentally repeat, I am meant to live in peace, do you feel free? Circle yes or no. The takeaway from this exercise is simple. The voice of your inner teacher is not the one that tells you that the meaning of life is to do something you think you're supposed to. It's the sensation you get when you state that you are meant to live in peace. I've tested this exercise on hundreds of people, checking to see what combination of words best connects with them, with our integrity. After trying many different statements, I found that I am meant to live in peace rings the chime of truth more loudly and reliably than anything else. It works for virtually everyone I've asked, including not only earnest do-gooders, but also active addicts, extreme narcissists, and a couple of convicted murderers. These people weren't actually living in peace, but they stated that they were meant to be at peace. All of them felt the physical and emotional release, the sense of freedom that is the inner teacher saying true. You may have noticed that I didn't ask you to record what your mind thought when you said, I am meant to so-and-so, and I am meant to live in peace. If you're making yourself do something you don't like, it's because your mind believes you must. Ask it what's true, and it will just parrot whatever you've been taught to believe. Tell your mind that the only sure things in the world are death and taxes, and it will agree. Suggest that you're meant to live in peace, and your mind will probably raise one eyebrow and sneer. In fact, right now you may be thinking, but I am meant to take out the garbage. Nobody else in my family ever does. If we all just stopped taking out the garbage, the world would go to hell in a handbasket, and whoever gets to live in complete peace. That's ridiculous. And how does that make you feel? The first neuroscientists who studied decision-making were surprised to find that people who damaged the logical, calculating areas of the brain had no trouble making good decisions. I'm going to read that again. The first neuroscientists who studied decision-making were surprised to find that people who damaged the logical, calculated areas of the brain had no trouble making good decisions. On the other hand, when people had damaged parts of their brain that handled emotion, they became unable to make any kind of a decision. They would weigh options endlessly, dithering and comparing, but never moving forward. They would reason all day, but they couldn't recognize a good decision if it bit them on both legs. It turns out that the deeper, evolutionarily older, more subtle the areas of the brain are, much better at making decisions than the calculating neocortex. That's why in order to hear our inner teachers, we have to tune in to physical and emotional senses. No matter how hard our brains insist on something like, I am meant to take out the garbage, the body and emotions won't hop on that ride. They'll stiffen our muscles, clench our jaws, make our stomachs churn, and our heads ache. It's not that there's anything wrong with taking out the garbage. You don't need to stop doing it. But taking out the garbage is not the meaning of your life. On the other hand, you may never remember feeling complete peace. You may have been taught that such a thing is impossible, but your inner teacher will validate this state. And whatever it takes for you to experience it is the meaning of your life. If you've done the exercises in this and the previous chapters, then you've already accepted the call to adventure that every hero hears at the outset of a great quest. I hope this book is an external teacher that can guide you through the steps to come. Remember what I've said about accepting my advice only if it resonates with your whole self. And above all, please learn to trust your inner teacher, the burst of relaxation and freedom that rings through your whole body. However your sense of truth feels to you, it will never let you down. And so, with your teacher beside you, or rather inside you, it's time to move on. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week.